And a very happy Monday to you at 12:06 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang has the week off. He'll be back with us on Monday. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. The voice is still a bit stuffy. Apparently that woman who got me sick on the plane had the Wuhan strain. I don't know. I thought I'd have a regular voice by now, but I guess that's not in the cards. All right, there's a lot to get to today, including a story that many of you emailed me over the weekend. And I can always tell that you're interested in something when I open up the email and we have 25 emails sharing the same story. What was on your radar over the weekend? Well, it was California Attorney General Rob Bonta who did the media rounds and says that he spent almost $500,000 on attorneys because he was a witness in the investigation regarding former Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao, the Dong family, and California Waste Solutions. This evolution took place in just a short period of time. Don't forget, not long ago, he was saying that he used the money basically as a goodwill gesture because he was aiding in the investigation on the Dong family and using his own campaign funds to do it, which would be totally unheard of. Because if you're the attorney general of the state, you think a crime had occurred, you can use taxpayer funds to launch an investigation. That's what those offices are for. That's what those budgets are for. But he came out and said, oh, no. I'm so invested in making sure that crime is solved in California. I'm going to spend my own money to do it. No one believed that. So now he's out saying he was a witness in an investigation and felt the need to spend $500,000 as part of that investigation. He's also saying that he's kicking tires on running for governor and acted like all of this was no big deal. There's also been a complaint filed against him by the Fair Political Practices Commission because when you're a politician and you're raising money, that money is supposed to go to radio ads, television ads, mail, bumper stickers, airplane tickets. You get the gist. It's supposed to be spent for your reelection or political activities. If you're spending it on attorneys because you're a witness in an investigation, that doesn't seem like an appropriate use of those funds. Joining us to talk about this is a man who has been at the forefront of this investigation. He's the host of the Gotham Oakland podcast, which you can get online on YouTube. And you can follow him on X at Seneca Speaks 21. Seneca Scott, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Sean, for having me back. What a day. What a Monday.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. Let's start out with a change in his explanation as to what the money was spent on. Initially, he said the money was spent to help aid the investigation against California Waste Solutions, Sheng Tao, the Dong family, and others. Now he's acknowledging, oh no, the money was spent on attorneys representing me, but only because I was a witness in this investigation.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't add up. I'm guessing the second, maybe they're closer to the truth with the second explanation. But there's a lot more about Rob Bonta that hasn't been said in the mainstream media yet. And you know I always have a rant for you, so whenever you're ready, I'll give it to you.
Lay it on us.
So let's start with the news everyone's dancing around. It's not just the $500,000. It's not just him protecting himself. It's just these problems aren't new. They're just finally gaining some visibility. So for years, the Bonta political machine had been running a quiet alleged corruption racket. The apparently legal, but murkily legal kind, built on relationship with the same political operator now under federal investigation. So let's break down this network, John. First, we have Andy Duong. You know who that is, the Duong family, whose homes and businesses were raided by the FBI the same day as former Mayor Sheng Tao. Duan calls Bonta what? His brother. And they do. They travel the world, luxury events, limo rides. This wasn't just a casual relationship with the donor. It appears to be a business partnership. So then there's the Oakland political operative and Bonta confidant, Mario Juarez, alleged to be co-conspirator number one, who also sent that now famous letter to Bonta warning him that there were incriminating videos of him as part of a blackmail plan by the Duong family. Mario Juarez has numerous tax liens, bounce checks, multiple failed companies, and a felony fraud case tied to an illegal campaign mailer that was sent out to take out Sheng Tao's main competitor, Lauren Taylor, and those charges were just routinely dropped last year, likely as part of a deal. Again, we don't know that for sure, but most people are confident that he is co-conspirator number one. Here's what things get juicy at, that no one's talking about. This was first reported by Voices of San Francisco a year ago. So Rob Bonta personally pushed the state of California to give $3.4 million to a biodiesel company ran by Mario Juarez, Veredis Fuels, which collapsed immediately after taking in that cash. But that didn't stop California later from pumping up that project to $38 million in bonds. And then that money vanished, no explanation. Fun fact, the head of Veredis Fuels is the ex-wife of Elihu Harris, former mayor of Oakland. Just leave that there in your brain. So here's the kicker. Mia Bonta's campaign office was at the exact same address as Veredis Fuel and Mario Juarez's office. Same building, same donors, same circle. That is not 6 degrees of separation or an accident. That's 1 degree, John, and a shared office key. But it gets worse. The same donor network tied to the Bontas also controlled a karaoke bar, music cafe that was raided for human trafficking, narcotics, and money laundering. Undercover agents bought ketamine and ecstasy on site. They saw women being sexually trafficked, human trafficking, and the people involved were also making political donations to the Bonta machine. Meanwhile, Mia Bonta was allowed to chair the state budget subcommittee that oversees the Department of Justice, run by her own husband. Even the LA Times called that an outrageous conflict of interest. But that didn't stop Rob Bonta from behesting over $5.8 million in special interest while in the assembly, money that flowed into nonprofits and political operations tied to his own family, including his wife, Mia Bonta, where she drew a 6-figure salary. So now, when Bonta quietly drops nearly $500,000 on lawyers, understand this is not a routine expense. This is a very powerful man fortifying himself because he knows investigators are tugging on all the same threads. Because if I know this and you know this, that means the feds probably know it too. And not just what we know, but this failed fuel company, all of this connections to Mario Juarez and the Duong. So it feels like Californians are watching a political empire built on assets, incestual politics, and self-dealing finally start to show some cracks. So it's time to start the media to start acting more responsibly. Not you, John, of course. You do a great job. I think you're probably one of the top voices at pointing out these things. But the truth is simple. This isn't a surprise. This is the bill finally coming due. That's my rant.
And I'll tell you, if what you just described is what sparked this investigation, if the feds were looking at where that money went, because you're talking about a lot of money here, state money, taxpayer money, that would also be consistent with what Sheng Tao has been saying ever since this started, which is that the federal government told her she was not the target of this investigation. Now, once you start pulling at strings, if you're looking at the Oakland political machine and the dirty dealings going on there, it won't take you very long before you get to Sheng and you find out something unethical that she was up to. But if this was the focus of the investigation, then that is consistent with what Sheng and her attorneys have been saying since day one.
It's true. It looks like the more you find out, the more you think that they're after a much bigger fish. I believe that we talk about running for governor because if Rob Bonta was to run for governor, even with this scandal, he would still likely be a top candidate. I believe that's the sort of scare people into compliance because who wants to go on air or who wants to come out and write articles about someone who could end up being governor who I can tell you personally can be sort of vengeful sometimes. So people, I think he's doing that as sort of a soft threat to stop people from accurately reporting on this with the fear that he may actually get through it because no one ever seems to actually get punished for this massive corruption in California. And then you would be dealing at him being one of the most powerful people in American politics. That's just my guess. But anyway, what do I know?
Knowing what you know, though, with all of this hanging over him, if he were to run for governor, he's not running against a weak field. Well, I guess he is running against a weak field because no one's been able to run away with this thing. But let me put it this way. He would be running against Tom Steyer, who's a billionaire, who would have the ability to do Oppo research on all of his candidates, find the skeletons in their closet, and have them dancing out on the front lawn. Katie Porter has been able to raise money over the course of her political career. And if she sees Rob Bonta as a threat, she's going to start digging. And then you have the potential candidacy of Rick Caruso, who is another billionaire who would have the money, the resources, the ability to start digging into Rob Bonta's past and to make sure that everyone in the state of California was aware of it. If he were to run for governor against two billionaires and other candidates who have the ability to raise money, isn't he risking everything, including potentially going to prison?
Absolutely. I think that's on the table anyway. Again, I don't believe he's considering running. I think he's saying that because they're just trying to buy another day before they can figure out what sort of protection or who they can, how can they maneuver to get past this or beyond this. So again, I'm speaking on just from what we know, the research that other people have been doing, the fact that he changed his story. Had this been someone Rob Bonta was investigating, let's say Donald Trump had the exact same story, Rob Bonta would be on the front page calling him a liar, saying the story doesn't make sense. He has to know the story doesn't make sense, that he's given two different answers, fundamentally different answers, on where that $468 or so thousand dollars went and what was the purpose for it. And again, I have questions too. Did any of that money end up helping Chantal with her legal defense? Who is paying her legal bills? No one knows.
Nobody does know. And her main source of income was serving as the mayor of Oakland. And the moment that she was recalled, that money was turned off. And as far as I know, she's not gainfully employed anywhere in the city of Oakland. She's not sitting on personal wealth. How is she affording a legal defense?
I don't know, but I will say if Chantal is not, as we've both been saying, it appears that there's something else there, for them to be charging her with life in prison, and I believe that she's only been offered a deal of 20 years, maybe there's something we don't know. Maybe there's a deal that she's taking. Maybe something will happen over the year before this trial starts in October of 2026. But I just have a feeling a lot more is going to come out, and it's not going to be good for the Bonta family.
Mario Juarez, the whistleblower, said in his letter that the Dong family has a video of Rob Bonta in a compromising situation. He didn't describe what that situation was. He just said that it was essentially blackmail material that they had in their back pocket if and when they needed to use it to extract something from him as his position as Attorney General of the state of California. Bonta was asked about that over the weekend, and he denied it. He said there is no video, there is no compromising information, there is no blackmail material out there on him, and just dismissed it as rumor and innuendo.
I mean, that could be true. No one knows but him and the Duong family. We do know that here's one thing I know. The 2 terabytes of data that the FBI was talking about that they have, that's all video. There's more data. I do know that. So there's a lot of video in their terabytes of data that eventually will be coming out in discovery. So only time will tell exactly what the FBI knows, and if there's anything that the Duongs are holding back. I'm not sure what good any of that would do now when the Duong family is already facing pretty serious charges and life in prison.
One of the weird things about that trip to Vietnam that happened many moons ago, where the Dong family took not just Sheng Tao, but any number of local elected officials in the Bay Area on a trip to Vietnam. One of those individuals was a local elected, a city council member who has now been indicted and is allegedly cooperating with the feds, Brian Acevedo. And when he was asked by the local news about that trip, unprompted, he said, "I didn't take the dirty massage. I had nothing to do with a gentleman's massage when I was in Vietnam." And the guy who was asking him questions was Dan Noyes. And he said, I didn't ask you about any dirty massages going on in Vietnam. That just came out of nowhere. Sounded like a guilty conscience to me. I don't know, but that's a bizarre way to respond to a question that had nothing to do with a gentleman's massage.
Yeah, I just got a foot massage, is I believe what he said. I also heard rumors that he was caught with cocaine or drugs at the border, and that the Duong family had to pull a lot of strings to get him out of the country without any problems. Again, that's just alleged. But what happened on that trip, I've heard lots of rumors, and there have been some whistleblowers who have come forth. I can't repeat any of that stuff because it puts me in legal jeopardy. But let's just say when we finally find out the extent of what happened on that trip, I heard that Shin Tao's boyfriend, Andre, was hanging out with Curly, Brian Azevedo. I nicknamed him Curly. He used to have a crazy, ridiculous curl running down his face when he ran for office. But, who knows what's going on, but this is time and time again, we've had the same theme in California. People in power seem to have a lot of taxpayer money go their way, and that taxpayer money ends up lining the pockets of their friends, and nothing gets done. At best. That's not even counting any corruption. That's just the ancestral nature of California politics, which, again, is seeing our taxpayer dollars evaporate. I mean, the fact that there were nonprofits formed while the fires were raging in Los Angeles, and those nonprofits received a significant amount of money, to which now is being called into question. There's a lot going on, and I think California taxpayers deserve to know the truth about why we're taxed more than anyone else in the country and where our money's going.
Last question before you go. Based on the stories that you've heard, and I don't want any details because you're not at liberty to share them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how wild was that trip to Vietnam?
Oh, 10 plus. Absolute mayhem.
All right. Well, we're all going to wait and find out just exactly what happened, because I'm sure that story will come out at some point in the future. Seneca Scott, host of the Gotham Oakland podcast, who has been the leading voice on uncovering corruption in Oakland. Definitely check out that podcast. You can on YouTube, and you can follow him on X at Seneca Speaks 21. Seneca Scott, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me, John. Talk to you next time.
It's the John Phillips Show. It's the John Phillips Show. 800-222-5222 is telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And, of course, you can download the podcast edition of this program on your handy-dandy iPhone. All you have to do is subscribe to the podcast, and each and every podcast of the show will be downloaded automatically to your phone, and you can listen to us whenever and wherever you'd like. All right. One of the things that you see on social media a lot lately, if you are following any number of the conservative influencers, is that there is a scrum going on to find out who's going to take over for Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, of course, was the man behind Turning Point USA, TPUSA, who was assassinated in cold blood when he was speaking to a group of college kids at a university in the state of Utah. The alleged assassin, of course, is awaiting trial right now. That whole situation is a mess. And it didn't take long after it was announced that he had passed away before the jockeying started of other influencers trying to figure out who was going to pick up the mantle. who was going to be the next Charlie Kirk. And when you think about the space that Charlie Kirk occupied in the conservative movement, he really was the person who was talking to the college kids more than anyone. You have personalities on cable news who talk to the older crowd. You have personalities on AM radio who talk to many of those same people. You have personalities on Twitter and personalities on Instagram and I guess TikTok and other places that talk to different populations. And everyone is trying to anoint themselves as the next Charlie Kirk, including his wife, who not long after Charlie was laid to rest said that she would be taking over Turning Point USA and continuing the legacy. But it's not as if she doesn't have competitors who are looking to do the same exact thing. Now, obviously, they won't be able to place themselves in charge of Turning Point USA. That's her husband's corporation, and she says that's going to be her. But there's nothing that says that the next leader in the conservative movement for the college kids has to come from that organization. It can come from a different organization. They can be an independent voice. They can come from working for a big corporation. Who knows where that person is going to come from? Now, when you look at what's going on there, you can try to place it in historical context, because this isn't the first time that an organization or an entity has had a very famous person leave for one reason or another, and then the question started, who's going to take over? And to my eye, there are two examples as to how this could go. And I'm not going to make any predictions here as to who will take over and who will become the next Charlie Kirk, because only time will tell. And to be truthfully honest with you, I'm not clairvoyant. I can't see into the future. I have no idea who that person is going to be, so I'm not even going to speculate. But there are two examples from the past that jump out at me as to how this can go down. Two very different examples from the past. Let's start with one. And that was, and this name may shock you that I'm going to bring this up in this context, but I do think it's relevant. Oprah Winfrey. There was no bigger star in television, in daytime talk, than Oprah Winfrey. She essentially created an entirely new genre on her own. We had a lot of different daytime talk shows, and in the 1990s, you couldn't turn on a television in the middle of the day without seeing him. And boy, was that TV wild. We had Jerry Springer, and we had Ricky Lake, and we had Maury Povich, and we had the final years of Phil Donahue, and we had some that were even more wild than the ones that I just mentioned. And it was the KKK on with the Black Panthers, and Geraldo getting his nose broken. And it was, I'm leaving my spouse for someone of the same sex, and I'm in love with a horse. And you know the whole thing. And Oprah decided that she was going to go in a different direction from everyone else, and she was going to be the self-help guru. And she created all of these new media personalities that turned into franchises on their own. She created Dr. Oz. She created Dr. Phil. She created New York Times bestsellers. She had the Oprah Book Club. And if your book was placed on Oprah's book club, that book would sell a gazillion copies because so many people hung on Oprah's every word. And if Oprah gave your book the blessing, then guess what? You had it made in the shade. And Oprah made a ton of money doing that talk show because her success was unparalleled. None of those other talk show hosts got close to Oprah Winfrey's success. They all made a lot of money. They all did fine for themselves. They all had their own silos, their own audiences, and they could sell books and they could sell live shows and they could sell, I don't know, whatever products it was that Sally Jesse was hawking. Maybe red glasses, whatever it was. But none of them got close to Oprah Winfrey. And then all of a sudden, Oprah Winfrey announced that she was leaving television. She was leaving her syndicated daytime talk show. And then that's when the question started. Who will replace Oprah? And if you are the company that employs Oprah, or you are the stations that take Oprah's show, from your point of view, you get to decide because you have control over who goes into that time slot. You have control over who takes over your airwaves. They don't go on television without you signing off. So if you're the television network, you're the syndicator, you're whomever, from your point of view, you get to make the decision. But that's not how it works. The suits don't always make the decision. The audience makes the decision. Just because Oprah was able to generate a big audience and a huge following doesn't mean that's transferable. It's not like you own a house, you die, you can leave the house to your children, to your siblings, to your parents, to your friends, to whoever. It doesn't work that way. You have an audience, and that audience decides where they go. I don't even remember who the network decided would be the next Oprah. I really don't. I know they had someone in mind. I know they had an idea as to where they wanted it to go, but I can't tell you who that person was because it was so forgettable. Maybe some of you can look it up online and email it in, but I don't even remember who it was. But there was a personality who became the number one daytime host for years and years and years and years and made a gazillion dollars doing it. And this person wasn't anointed. This person wasn't given Oprah's blessing. This person wasn't hired by Oprah's network. This person wasn't represented by Oprah's agent. This person just did it on their own. They saw the power vacuum that existed and they took it. And that person was Judge Judy. Judge Judy became the new Oprah. Judge Judy's program was in no way similar to Oprah's. She didn't do a talk show. She didn't do self-help. She didn't create all of these new personalities, absent maybe Bert the bailiff. That wasn't what she did. She just had two people on who were involved in a dispute, and she insulted the living hell out of both of them. And then she decided who won. And the more embarrassing the problem, the better off it was. You have a couple, they had a long-term relationship, they've got 4 teeth between the two. They lived in a trailer park, and now they have to move because the trailer couldn't pass the smog test. And then the guy was cheating on the wife with another person in the trailer park. And the wife found out about it, and there was hair pulling, and weaves were going all over the place, and it became a whole scene. So now they went to Splitsville, and they need Judge Judy to determine who gets the lawn furniture. Because they have 2 plastic chairs in the front of the trailer and an above-ground pool in the back of the trailer that also has 2 chairs. And sometimes they throw the chairs in the water. And the chairs don't even go to the bottom of the water. They just throw them in there. And those are the 4 chairs in the above-ground pool that they're fighting over. And then Judge Judy gets to determine who gets all of those items. And it's just 7 minutes of insult comedy where they get up there and they try to make their case. And she tells them that they have the IQ of an ice cube in August. And she tells them at the end that they deserve one another. And because there is no one on planet Earth as dumb as the two of them, they will not be happy with anyone else. So they need to find a way to kiss and make up. Otherwise, they will die alone. And you couldn't take your eyes off it. It was just the best thing on daytime TV. It was new. They always had those judge shows, but the judges would try to be nice and compassionate and whatever. Not Judge Judy. She was the Dr. Laura of the law profession, and I couldn't get enough. And apparently, the same thing was true for the rest of America. Because when Oprah left daytime TV, Judge Judy just shot right to the top of the chart. She became number one. And it all went to her. It wasn't spread across all of the other talk shows in the middle of the day. She was the clear beneficiary of Oprah leaving television. It went to Judge Judy, and maybe there are people who will dispute that. They're wrong. That's where it went. And anyone who doesn't see that doesn't understand the broadcast medium. That's example number one. Example number two comes from radio. When Howard Stern, who declared himself to be the king of all media, left radio for Sirius satellite radio, the suits decided who would take over for Howard. And they split it up into, I guess, they split the country into three sections, where they had David Lee Roth take over the Howard Stern slot on the East. They had, I think it was Steve Dahl in the Middle West. I could be wrong on that. And then it was Adam Carolla on the West Coast. And they decided that Howard Stern's audience would be split into threes, and those are the three shows that the audience would go to. And I think David Lee Roth didn't even last a year. I can't even remember who the one in the Middle West was. Adam Carolla did well for himself, but it wasn't with the Howard Stern audience. He went out and found his own audience. And the truth of the situation is that of Howard Stern's terrestrial radio audience, some of them went with Howard to Sirius, enough for him to make a ton of money over there and re-sign a couple of times. Some of them went to those three shows that I just described. But for the most part, what happened was his audience went all over the place. Some of them went to AM Talk. Some of them went to the FM morning shows. Some of them went to public radio. Some of them went to listening to CDs in their car. Some of them went to listening to podcasts. Some of them went to satellite on other programs. It went all over the place. It was a scattershot. There was no one singular beneficiary of Howard Stern leaving terrestrial radio. The audience was spread all over the place. And many people benefited in small amounts because you're going to see an uptick in your audience if suddenly people start listening to you who used to listen to another show. But it's not like you're going to see your numbers double overnight or triple overnight the way it happened with Judge Judy. It was just an audience that was dispersed all over the place. And there was no new Howard Stern to morning radio. It didn't happen that way. And my guess, and this is just a hunch, that when it comes to picking an individual to take over the space that Charlie Kirk used to occupy in terms of conservative commentary geared towards the college crowd, it's either going to go the Oprah direction or the Howard Stern direction. Either all of these people who are trying to become the next Charlie Kirk are going to get a little bit of his audience, but no one's going to get the preponderance of it, or some new voice is going to emerge, either at Turning Point USA with some other organization or independent and on their own, and they are just going to take that audience without being anointed. Those are the two best models, to my eye, that we have on how this might go down. But who knows? As they say, political science is a science of one-time occurrences. So those are the two examples that we have now, but just because those are the two that we have at our fingertips doesn't mean that that's how it's going to go down here. Maybe there's a third option that we're not thinking about, but as of right now, I say it'll either go down the Oprah way or it's going to go down the Howard Stern way, one of those two. It's the John Phillips Show. It's the John Phillips Show. 800-222-5222 is telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. The Fix California Hour coming up after the news at 1. We're going to speak to a gentleman by the name of Joel Gilbert. He has a movie that's coming out about Roseanne Barr and the trials that she has been through, including being canned by ABC after a tweet that the Obamas didn't like, and others. So stick around for that. He's going to join us in just a few minutes. I've got to say, after conducting the interview with Seneca Scott earlier in the hour, where he talked about that trip to Vietnam that the Dong family took Sheng Tao and the local elected officials from the East Bay, where we knew that something wild happened, just based on the descriptions that we've heard from some people who were on that trip and what has trickled out on social media and elsewhere. But when I asked him on a scale of 1 to 10 how wild that trip was, and he said a 10 plus, let me tell you, I wonder, knowing how many people right now are talking to the federal government. They're talking to the FBI. They're talking to the Department of Justice. They're talking to all the different groups of people that are looking into what has been going on with that family and with local elected officials in the East Bay. How many people are shaking in their boots right now about someone with loose lips explaining just exactly what went on that trip and who did what? Boy, I can't wait to find out just exactly what happened. And I'm sure at some point we'll all find out. All right, we've got 2 more hours coming up on the John Phillips Show. Don't you go anywhere.